So we can do parts A and part B for this both at the same time. What kind of movement is that? Left, right, or up or down? It's going to move it right pi over 6 units. Now, as far as graphing this, if you were asked to graph y equals cos x minus pi over 6, what they're asking is B is actually what you're going to do. So if you were just asked to graph cos of x minus pi over 6, what I would recommend and what we're going to do is we're first going to draw something without the shift. So in this case, I'm going to draw cos. What does cos look like? It has a maximum of 1, a minimum of -1. The period of cos, 2 pi, divided into 4 equal sections. And I'm going to temporarily draw cos. So when we temporarily draw something, we're going to draw it with a dotted line. So we know that cos starts at a maximum, goes to the middle, down to the minimum, back to the middle, back to the maximum. And I'm just going to draw it with a dotted line to show that's my original graph of cos. Now, to graph cos of x minus pi over 6, once you've got your original graph of cos, you have to figure out where is pi over 6 on here. Well, if we think in degrees, pi over 6 is 30 degrees. Pi over 2 is 90 degrees. So 1/3 of the way towards pi over 2 would be pi over 6. And so we're going to take each of those ticky marks that we originally drew, and we're going to shift everything over pi over 6 to the right. So this one is going to shift to here, this one to shift to there, this one to shift to there, and this one to shift to there. So I make all of my ticky marks along my axis move pi over 6 to the right. Then I'm going to take each of my points. So I have this at this maximum. It needs to shift pi over 6 to the right. This one at the middle shifts pi over 6 to the right. This minimum shifts pi over 6 to the right. This middle value shifts pi over 6 to the right. And this maximum shifts pi over 6 to the right. So when I draw this curve through those points, this is how you would graph it if it continued on forever. We have to be careful in this question because this question says only graph it from 0 to 2 pi and don't continue. So I've graphed it and I made it continue. What I would have to do at this situation is take out my eraser and maybe I'll mark at 2 pi it would end about there, right? And at 0 it would end about there. So I'll take out my eraser and just erase my arrowhead. So now I've graphed it exactly from 0 to 2 pi. Generally on your final exam, they don't give you an exact domain that you have to graph things over. They find that that makes things a little bit difficult because it feels a little bit weird just to start sort of in the middle of nowhere and to end sort of in the middle of nowhere. It felt a lot cleaner to end, right? When we ended at this point there or started at that point, it was a lot easier. Generally on your final exam, these kind of questions say graph at least one period. So if you just did the dots, the 4 dots, and joined them, you would get full marks because you've made one period. If you continued it and put arrowheads, you'd get full marks because you've made at least one period and continued it. So that's generally, although in the textbook, we do find a number of questions give a specific domain. So we're going to practice that as well, just so we get a sense of what does it mean if I only want to graph a certain part of it and exactly that part. Okay, the questions for this one. Did I give you the questions for the last one? No. Okay, questions for the last one were 3, C, and D, so that was question number 2. The questions for this one are 3, E, and F. So yesterday, example 1 was 3A and B, so now you can do all of 3.